Teams of Men, founder, lead facilitator. Coaches out there, I was thinking about, where does unlearning, what role does unlearning play in your program? Because I know, having been a coach for 20 plus years myself at the NCAA Division III level, I know we were always trying to educate and install new things and new schemes, new ideas, new skill sets on the floor. But as I got into the Teams of Men work about a decade ago, I started recognizing the power of unlearning and how much dropping old beliefs, how much dropping previous ideas that had grown stale or been proven to be harmful was helpful for growing as a man. So how does that apply in our programs? How does that apply in the sports we coach as well as the players we lead? And I really wanted to kind of go through this thought exercise. And I want to give a lot of credit to the framework of the exercise we're going to do here together, where I'm sharing to the RACA process. And that is courtesy of the guys. And I'll put their information down here for everybody to see, their website, their process, their social media platforms at Essential Coaching. That's Asim Rastogi and Coach Kyle Kavanaugh. Like I said, go follow them right now. They do this RACA chat process every single Monday. And I don't get to do all of them all the time, but it's a phenomenal exercise. And they've really built a great framework that I want to walk through with you today in a ways to go about with a lot of your coaching, their RACA framework. And you'll see some of it today as we go through this, but I can't shout them out enough for kind of the prompt of this as we go, because it really is a fantastic way to really engage yourself in helpful reflection, helpful analysis, clarity, and ways to go forward with action plans, right? So let's start here. Let's start with a reflection question of, what do you think out there? And they asked this of me in the process. What were things, in looking back at the program I ran, that I think players needed to, unlearn to successfully join our group? And I'll always put picture in a picture here of the question. Once again, courtesy of Asim and Kyle, and you should do this exercise yourself. But what are three things that people that were going to play for Kip, the coach, the basketball coach, what did they have to unlearn? And I think a lot of people probably jump immediately to, hey, you got to drop selfishness, you got to drop ego, you got to drop what you think is your role, you got to accept what we give as your role. Maybe you got to drop some bad habits as a basketball player. Maybe you've got to unlearn what your high school coach told you to play. Maybe you got to unlearn old ways of different verbiage, different terminology, and you got to onboard ours. And I don't think those are wrong. I don't think those are bad things to focus on in terms of what kids have to unlearn to play for me. And I probably would have answered that in the first couple of years of my career as a head coach. I probably would have answered some way that question of, what do they have to do to be successful? What do they have to drop? But I think 2 decades in from my start, a decade into embracing the Teams of Men framework, which you're following me for, I would say to succeed, to play for me. And maybe if you're starting to adopt the Teams of Men framework yourself in your program, whether that's basketball, football, soccer, lacrosse, doesn't matter. I think these 3 things need to be unlearned to succeed and exist in a Teams of Men framework program. Unlearn the rules of the man box. Unlearn that your value as a man is rooted in this sport. Your value as a man is not rooted in this sport. Hopefully you'll have some success, some achievement in this sport, but even then, that shouldn't equal your value. And then finally, unlearn the idea that achievement on the court or on the field is a hall pass for morality off it. Once we had fully embraced and recruited to the Teams of Men framework, unlearning the man box, unlearning value tied to athletic accomplishment, and unlearning the idea that athletic accomplishment was a hall pass for morality, those were 3 non-negotiables for us that guys really had to dive into. Next question. Based on what we just said, how do you message the things they need to unlearn and raise your athletes' awareness to those things? Okay, it's one thing to say, well, I expect my guys to blah, 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 and then not even talk about it, not tell them. I don't think you can fail to notify someone and then hold them accountable to failure to do if you haven't talked to them about it. So in reflecting about this, I don't think you can spring the 3 things we talked about in the front: dropping the man box, dropping values assigned to achievement on the field or court, and dropping the idea that achievement's a hall pass for morality. I think we had to recruit to it. not just the players, but the parents we wanted. If you're even at a high school level, I think you need to notify parents of your framework and your expectations of the humanity of their sons that exist with you. And you're looking for people to invest in it up front. It's a really hard sell in flow. Okay. So, and I think dosage matters in raising awareness. You can't just go put up a sign in the team room and say, hey, here's the 3 things you have to unlearn. There's the sign. Everybody got it? Cool. Let's go to practice. You need a minimum 5 exposures to the framework, 5 exposures to the things you expect them to unlearn, and discussion and space to deep dive them. If you want to start to build some familiarity with this new belief system, and you probably got to double that 5 exposure to 10, triple that 5 exposure to 15, if my math's right, or maybe it's 20. I don't remember. You got to double, triple that exposure to get movement in decision action. You can get some awareness with 5, some fluency with it, but to actually get choices rooted, new choices, change of behavior in those 3 things we want to unlearn, I think you got to have, like, we were up to about 20 sessions a year where we were purposely creating space and dialogue and conversation and activities around unlearning the man box, around stopping identifying ourselves as just a basketball player and finding value in ourselves as a person, and stopping the idea that being a successful basketball player means we can behave in a certain way. And remember, growth is messy. Growth is unpredictable, and growth is exceptionally individual. You can't go expecting every single guy in your team room to follow the exact timeline, hit the milestone moments at specific dates exactly the same way. You embrace that it's not your job as the coach to demand that they hit deadlines on their journey. It's your job to give them the tools to navigate the journey as they can. Okay. So I think that's how we would raise the awareness to the things we want them to unlearn. Next question. What ways do you provide chances, opportunities, reps at unlearning and not just onboarding new things? I think all coaches watching, if you've had a job for a while, even if you're new and you just got hired, it's because you are capable of scheduling out new things. You're capable of installing new things on the court or the field. What does it look like to provide space and time to unlearn things? I think my answer there revolves around the idea that curiosity is a superpower. And learning as a coach to lead with questions rather than statements goes a long way in getting buy-in from young men. Who taught you that? Why do you think that is? What ways did what you just say show up in your life before you got to me? How do you think it shows up now in this new space? I think those are all questions that we used a lot to get investment from guys into the thought, into the reflection, into the process. Many of the meetings and focusing in the sessions where we focused on the unlearning, they weren't mandates from me. I wasn't saying, hey, that thing, no more, done, end of discussion. They were thought exercises that were led with curiosity that could go a lot of different directions based on the team discussions. So I think curiosity is a superpower as a starting point. And then I think the through line is the idea that vulnerability is a connection point. And sharing my own pain points, my own failures, my own shortcomings as a person, as an athlete, as a father, as a husband, as a brother, as a son, I think gave permission to my guys to do the same thing. And I think that's where coaches stumble the most, is an unwillingness to be vulnerable and share that you're less than sometimes. I know we have to be leaders. I know we have to stand up in front. But a lot of times standing up in front and sharing vulnerability allows you to connect and galvanize that audience. You can't unlearn things. You can't expect them to unlearn things without being introspective about you, about themselves. And you can't unlearn without being ready to embrace your faults. So I think coaches, you have to model those things in order for your players to take them up as toolkits. Next, how do you utilize older or more veteran players and parents to help new parents and players unlearn? And I think the parent part of that is especially vital if you got a middle school or a high school program. Once again, another fantastic reason to reach out to the guys at Essential Coaching. Once again, here's their contact info, because they are specialists in that parent dynamic and that parent relationship. But I think for me, in aligning this unlearning expectation for new players and bringing the older veteran players who have lived it into the fold, you got to remember, if you say that your older players are your best recruiters, and that means they're also your best modelers. And depending on who they are, sometimes your guys aren't the best orators or sharers verbally in certain spaces. Some of them are. But if they've embraced the unlearning, if they're a junior that embraced dropping the man box, that embraced no longer viewing themselves as value only in points per game, that embrace that points per game doesn't give them a hall pass from humanity, they should be modeling everyday behavior that coincides with those traits. And at least in the very minimum, they're modeling what it looks like to live in the light of unlearning those three things. Hopefully they're speaking to it. You hope the young guys, you've created a culture of curiosity where the young guys go up to them when you're not in the room and they say, why do we do things like that? Or why do you believe that? When did you start learning this stuff? I mean, I think those are all questions that you hope are happening. You can prompt some of them in the sessions, but you hope they're happening organically behind the scenes with your guys. And if it is, then you know the older guys are invested in actually contributing to this unlearning. Finally, okay, what do you believe a team that has unlearned? What does an unlearned team look, feel, and sound like? I think it's a great question. I think if you've truly embraced unlearning of the three things we mentioned, it should feel, sound, look like a team that cares about impact and doesn't accept intent as an excuse for a negative version of impact. It should be in the business of using phrases like in amongst themselves and when you're there, when you're not. My guy, that's on me. I know that landed wrong with you. Or I have to be better. My bad, man. Or yo, we don't treat people like that here. Level up, brother. Those are some phrases that you could use in different versions that fit you and your personality and your team's personality. But those are phrases that I think you could hear that would cue you into, man, we are doing some of this unlearning. We are building into the three tent poles of unlearning that I mentioned. It should feel, especially to the players, like being around your team, being in your team environment is a place where they can express their whole selves. And in doing so, and being their whole selves, they also expect and want to be accountable to growing what that wholeness means. Because I think sometimes when we say, I want to be me, that's a good thing. But sometimes me requires you to grow more. Okay. So it's not, I think sometimes I'm going to be me is a retreat back to, I know this, I'm comfortable. I don't want to be uncomfortable. I don't want to grow. So I think we want, hey, be you here, but recognize that when you're all of you here, being amongst us is going to allow you to grow what all of you means. So I think that's my visual or digital version of going through this exercise. Like I mentioned, this is a direct correlation to the great team at Coaches Essential Coaching, Asim Rastogi, Kyle Kavanaugh. Here's their information. Follow their website, follow their socials, jump on their reflection sessions every Monday, and you can do some of this work yourself. I hope this was helpful for you, me sharing my thoughts on it, but they do this every Monday going forward. Kip Ioane, Teams of Men.